Hi everyone, welcome back to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. We have been reading very well together. I know several of you will be reading without my assistance, which means you're not listening to this. And hopefully lots of you who will have worries about reading and exploring new vocabulary and exploring what readers do, you are listening along with me and reading along with me in your book. So you can pick up on all those little things I do. Remember, I have been reading for approximately 28 years. So I've probably got a bit of experience on you guys. English has always been my number one passion, so I've always been an avid reader. It is harder to read out loud, but I think for you guys it's really important that I demonstrate to you what a good reader does, and it will help you to explore connections you can make, explore how you can infer, explore how you reread, because I know a lot of people think rereading means you're not a good reader, but it shows you're listening as you read and it's showing your understanding, because if it doesn't make sense, I go back and reread. Especially if sometimes, if you've never read the book before, I reread the sentence because it doesn't sound right, or I've read it in the wrong context. So we're up to chapter 13. My reading only has 2 parts for chapter 13. Once again, as always, look back to what we've just discovered. It is called Nicholas Flamel. So if I think back, I remember chapter 12, that Harry wanted to wear the cloak to head straight to the library. That didn't quite work out. So then it was all about Harry and the Mirror of Erised. So perhaps reading the last page of page 230 of chapter 12 isn't going to help me make any connections to Nicholas Flamel. I have to think back further. So remember that Hagrid had accidentally said the name, so Hermione, Ron and Harry had spent a lot of time in the library trying to find out. But they had no clues as to where to start, so they were trying to go through every single library book. So, page 231, chapter 13, Nicholas Flamel. Dumbledore had convinced Harry not to go looking for the Mirror of Erised again. And for the rest of the Christmas holidays, the invisibility cloak stayed folded at the bottom of his trunk. Harry wished he could forget what he'd seen in the mirror as easily, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares. Over and over again, he dreamed about his parents disappearing in a flash of green light, while a high voice cackled with laughter. So have a think about who that high voice could possibly belong to. There's probably quite a few choices you could make. Rather than making one specific choice, you might just list in your head all the different people or characters that would fit that idea of someone cackling with laughter. You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could drive you mad, said Ron when Harry told him about these dreams. Hermione, who came back the day before the term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between horror at the idea of Harry being out of bed roaming the school 3 nights in a row, if Filch had caught you, and disappointment that he hadn't at least found out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flamel in a library book, even though Harry was still sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry had even less time than the other two because Quidditch practice had started again. Wood was working the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, they would overtake Slytherin in the House Championship for the first time in 7 years. Quite apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out after training. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He'd just got very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. "Will you stop messing around?" he yelled. "That's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor." George Weasley really did fall off his broom at these words. "Snape's refereeing?" he spluttered through a mouthful of mud. "When's he ever refereed a Quidditch match? He's not going to be fair if we might overtake Slytherin." The rest of the team landed next to George to complain too. "It's not my fault," said Wood. We've just got to make sure we play a clean game, so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us. Which was all very well, thought Harry, but he had another reason for not wanting Snape near him while he was playing Quidditch. Can you think back to what happened in the last Quidditch match and Hermione had to make a move to stop what was going on? The rest of the team hung back to talk to each other as usual at the end of practice, but Harry headed straight back to the Gryffindor common room where he'd found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione ever lost at, something Harry and Ron thought was very good for her. Don't talk to me for a moment, said Ron when Harry sat down next to him. I need to concentrate. He caught sight of Harry's face. What's the matter with you? You look terrible. Speaking quietly so that no one else would hear, Harry told the other two about Snape's sudden, sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. Don't play, said Hermione at once. Say you're ill, said Ron. Pretend to break your leg? Hermione suggested. Really, break your leg, said Ron. I can't, said Harry. There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all. At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. Now, I like the way JK's used the word toppled to describe how he has arrived. Think back at all the incidents you can recall Neville being in and how his character behaves. How he managed to climb through the portrait hole was anyone's guess because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognised as once as the leg locker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell about laughing except Hermione, who leapt up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart and he got to his feet trembling. So, even when Neville's not being clumsy on his own, there's other people causing this issue. I wonder who put the curse on him. Have you got a few ideas? So name one or two or possibly even three capable culprits who could have done such a thing to Neville. I know who the number one is in my head, so there's my prediction. So I'm going to let you know if my prediction was right or wrong, or even if we find out. What happened? Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Harry and Ron. Malfoy, said Neville shakily. I met him outside the library. He'd been looking for someone to practice that on. Ah, that was my prediction. Go to Professor McGonagall, Hermione urged Neville. Report him. Neville shook his head. I don't want more trouble, he mumbled. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Ron. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that. Neville choked. Harry felt in the pocket of his robes and pulled out a chocolate frog, the very last one from the box Hermione had given him for Christmas. He gave it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. So make that connection of when you've done something kind for someone to help them out, to help them think of other things when they might be feeling at their worst. Is there a connection of a time you can relate to, a time where you have felt at your worst, and perhaps someone else has done something kind for you to help you out? You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinkin' Slytherin. Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, don't you? As Neville walked away, Harry looked at the famous wizard card. Dumbledore again. He was the first one I ever... He gasped. He stared at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. I found him, he whispered. I found Flamel. I told you I'd read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they'd got back the marks for their very first piece of homework. Stay there, she said, and she sprinted up the stairs to the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron had barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back, an enormous old book in her arms. I never thought to look in here, she whispered excitedly. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. Light? said Ron, but Hermione had told him to be quiet until she'd looked something up, and she started flicking frantically through all the pages, muttering to herself. At last, she found what she was looking for. "I knew it! I knew it!" "Are we allowed to speak yet?" said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. "Nicholas Flamel," she whispered dramatically, "is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone." This didn't have quite the effect she'd expected. Why would it not have the effect she expected? Remembering that Hermione is very well read, she has studied lots and lots and lots. Ron and Harry probably don't have that same knowledge. So she said something very exciting and interesting, and the boys haven't quite picked up on it all. This didn't quite have the effect she'd expected. "The what?" said Harry and Ron. "Oh, honestly, don't you two read? Look, read that! There!" She pushed the book towards them, and Harry and Ron read. "The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Philosopher's Stone a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Philosopher's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Perenelle, 658. So Devon is the place he's currently living. "See," said Hermione when Harry and Ron had finished. "The dog must be guarding Flamel's Philosopher's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him, because they're friends, and he knew someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts." "A stone that makes gold and stops you ever dying," said Harry. "No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it." "And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that study of recent developments in wizardry," said Ron. "He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he?" The next morning, in defence against the dark arts, while copying down different ways of treating werewolf bites, Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with the Philosopher's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape and the coming match. "I'm going to play," he told Ron and Hermione. "If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win." "Just as long as we're not wiping you off the pitch," said Hermione. And I'm going to leave it there. We are halfway through page 237, and I'll be back shortly to read part 2. See you soon.